9:30 p.m. in a dimly lit room in London, a single document is placed on a polished wooden desk. No applause, no witnesses, just ink paper and a decision that should not exist. The signature authorizes the transfer of command over more than 250,000 men, thousands of vehicles, and the final defensive line of the British Empire in North Africa. The man receiving this power is not trusted. He is not liked. He is openly described as difficult, rigid, and dangerously self-confident. Yet the order stands. Once signed, it cannot be undone. Outside that room, the war is going badly. In the deserts of Egypt, British forces have been pushed back again and again. Units retreat faster than supplies can follow. Commanders are replaced, then replaced again. Morale is brittle. Maps change daily, sometimes hourly. Every report that reaches London carries the same unspoken fear. If the next line breaks, there is nothing behind it. Beyond the desert lies the Suez Canal. Beyond Suez lies the lifeline of an empire. Across the Mediterranean, German columns move with confidence. Their commander believes momentum is on his side. Intelligence suggests the British are exhausted, uncertain, and fractured at the top. Each delay favors the attacker. Each hesitation costs ground that cannot easily be regained. Time is no longer measured in weeks or miles. It is measured in hours, sometimes minutes. Inside the British system, the solution seems obvious to many. Choose a commander who cooperates, one who adapts, one who listens. The machinery of war prefers predictability. Committees, consensus, gradual adjustment. What it does not tolerate is a personality that bends, rules, ignores advice, and refuses to move until every condition is forced into his favor. And yet that is exactly who is being empowered. The new commander does not arrive with grand speeches or promises. He does not rush to the front to prove urgency. Instead, he stops everything. Movements slow. Plans are rewritten. Training intensifies while the enemy waits. To observers, it looks like paralysis. To critics, it feels like arrogance. Messages begin to cross the desert, sent in urgent tones from higher headquarters. Questions pile up. Why is nothing happening? Why is the initiative being surrendered? Behind the scenes, patience is thinning. The political leadership feels the pressure of allies watching closely, especially across the Atlantic. Confidence must be demonstrated, not delayed. Every day without action risks not only military defeat, but political fracture. And still the commander remains unmoved. He studies. He accumulates. He prepares with an almost obsessive certainty that when the moment comes, it must not merely succeed. It must end the argument forever. Back in London long after midnight, the man who signed the order looks again at the map. He understands the danger of what he has done. He has placed the fate of a continent into the hands of someone he cannot fully control. The system is uneasy. The clock is ticking. And somewhere in the desert, a confrontation is forming that will soon force everyone to choose between speed and certainty. Because when this commander finally moves, the war will not have room for second chances. At 10:15 a.m., the first reports begin arriving from the desert, and none of them make sense. Patrols confirm the enemy is still advancing, but not accelerating. Supply convoys move, then pause. Reconnaissance flights return with conflicting observations. Nothing is collapsing, yet nothing is improving. For the men watching the maps in Cairo and London, this is the most dangerous phase of war. The moment when uncertainty replaces momentum. The system reacts the only way it knows how. Questions are sent, clarifications demanded, timelines requested. The machinery of command expects reassurance in the form of action. An attack, even a limited one, would signal intent. A withdrawal would at least acknowledge reality. What it cannot tolerate is silence, followed by preparation. Inside the headquarters, the new commander issues instructions that seem almost heretical. Units are repositioned not forward, but inward. Training schedules are tightened instead of relaxed. Fuel and ammunition are stockpiled far beyond standard doctrine. Officers are told that there will be no retreat, not because retreat is forbidden, but because it will not be necessary. The tone is absolute. There is no hedging language, no conditional phrasing. To many within the chain of command, this borders on madness. The prevailing doctrine of the time values flexibility above all else. Strike when the enemy exposes weakness. Probe constantly. Adjust on the move. Waiting is interpreted as fear. Caution is seen as a symptom of indecision. Every hour spent preparing is an hour given to the opponent. That belief is deeply embedded, reinforced by recent defeats that are blamed not on aggression, but on hesitation. Yet this commander believes the opposite. He studies previous failures and draws a conclusion few are willing to accept. The British Army did not lose because it moved too slowly. It lost because it fought battles before it was ready to win them. In his view, speed without dominance is just noise. Action without certainty is theater. This philosophy immediately collides with the expectations of allies. Across the Atlantic, patience is thin. Support has been given with the assumption that it will be used decisively. Delays raise uncomfortable questions. Is the leadership fragmented? Is confidence faltering again? Political pressure begins to build subtle at first, then increasingly direct. Messages arrive with carefully chosen words: concern, curiosity, a need for reassurance. They all carry the same underlying demand: do something. The response when it comes is calm and unsettling. The commander explains that the battlefield is not yet shaped correctly, that the enemy still believes in momentum, that when the attack begins, it must not merely push the line back, but break the opponent's understanding of the war itself. This is not a plan measured in kilometers. It is measured in psychological collapse. Meanwhile, the soldiers on the ground feel the change. Discipline tightens. Confidence grows not from speeches, but from structure. For the first time in months, orders are clear and unchanging. There is no improvisation forced by panic. The men sense that something is being built around them layer by layer deliberately. Back in London, the political leadership watches this unfold with unease. The decision to empower this man was already a gamble. Now it appears to be drifting toward defiance. Advisors warn of lost initiative. Generals argue that the enemy will not wait. Every instinct honed by years of warfare screams that this pause will be punished. But there is also a quieter realization taking shape. The battlefield has stopped moving the way it used to. The enemy advances, but no longer dictates the rhythm. For the first time, the tempo feels controlled. And that is when the question changes. Not whether the attack will come, but what will happen when it finally does. By 1:40 p.m., the tension finally breaks the surface. Messages from London no longer ask for updates. They ask for explanations. The language shifts from cautious to sharp. Why has no offensive been launched? Why are divisions still repositioning instead of advancing? Why does the enemy appear to have more freedom of movement than expected? These are not idle questions. They are warnings. The pressure is not only military, it is political, and it is personal. Allies are watching. Every delay is interpreted as weakness, every pause as doubt. In war, perception travels faster than facts. Confidence can evaporate long before a single shot is fired. Those who sit far from the desert do not see preparation. They see risk compounding by the hour. Inside the command structure, dissent grows louder. Senior officers argue that the system cannot wait for perfection. They remind each other that no battle ever begins under ideal conditions. Weather shifts, supply lines stretch, intelligence is never complete. Victory, they insist, belongs to those who move first and adapt later. To do otherwise is to surrender initiative, the most precious currency of modern war. The commander listens. He does not interrupt. When he speaks, it is not to defend himself, but to redefine the argument. He explains that initiative is meaningless if it cannot be sustained, that attacking early only creates the illusion of control. What matters is not who strikes first, but who dictates the sequence that follows. In his mind, the next battle will not be decided by bravery or speed, but by inevitability. This is where his thinking diverges sharply from the system around him. He does not plan to surprise the enemy with movement. He plans to suffocate them with certainty. Every unit will know its role. Every supply route will be secured. Every contingency will be rehearsed until doubt is removed from the equation. When the line moves, it will move once, and it will not move back. Such thinking comes at a cost. Time. And time is the one resource no one believes they have. Reports indicate the enemy is reorganizing. Reinforcements may arrive. A window that exists today could close tomorrow. The fear is not imaginary. It is grounded in experience. Wars have been lost by waiting too long. Yet the commander accepts this risk without hesitation. To him, the greater danger lies in repeating the pattern of the past. Hastily assembled offensives, fragmented coordination, units thrown forward with hope instead of certainty. He has seen what that produces. Retreats disguised as maneuvers, casualties that achieve nothing, confidence that dissolves after first contact. On the ground, the effects of this philosophy become visible. Soldiers train not for advance, but for dominance. Exercises repeat until they are automatic. Communication lines are drilled until orders travel without friction. There is no talk of if, only when. The uncertainty that once haunted the ranks begins to fade, replaced by something more dangerous and more powerful. Expectation. The enemy does not notice this change at first. Intelligence reports focus on numbers, not intent. They see stockpiles growing and assume caution. They interpret silence as hesitation. The absence of movement reinforces their belief that pressure is working, that the British are still reacting, still unsure. This misreading is exactly what the commander is counting on. Back in London late in the afternoon, a senior advisor stares at the same map he has stared at for weeks. The lines have not moved, and yet something feels different. The situation is no longer spiraling, it is tightening, like a spring being compressed, not released. The question is no longer whether waiting is dangerous. The question is what happens when the waiting ends. At 6:10 a.m. the desert looks unchanged, the same horizon, the same dust hanging low in the air. To an outside observer, nothing suggests that the balance of the war is about to shift. There is no dramatic movement, no visible surge of armor, no sound that carries across the sand. And yet within headquarters the atmosphere has hardened. The waiting has ended. Orders begin moving through the system with unusual clarity. They are not improvised. They are not revised. Each instruction lands exactly where it was always meant to land. Units that have trained together for weeks receive commands they already expect. Supply columns begin rolling along routes that have been rehearsed again and again at precise intervals, without congestion or confusion. The machinery does not accelerate, it engages. What follows is not speed in the conventional sense, it is synchronization. This is where the system misjudges what is happening. Observers looking for a sudden thrust see only controlled motion. They assume this is another limited action, another probe designed to test reactions. Reports sent upward reflect that assumption. The enemy appears cautious, perhaps unsure. There is no sign of desperation, no sign of reckless commitment. That interpretation is dangerously wrong, because the commander is not attempting to seize ground. He is attempting to seize certainty. Every movement is designed to eliminate choice for the opponent. Positions are taken not for their visibility, but for their inevitability. Routes are closed before they are needed. Firepower is allocated not to respond, but to prevent response altogether. The battlefield is being shaped faster than intelligence can describe it. Within hours, the opposing command begins to feel the pressure, though it cannot yet explain it. Communications become strained. Units report contact where none was expected. Gaps appear between formations that were assumed to be secure. Attempts to counter-move run into prepared resistance not by chance, but by design. The rhythm of the battle is no longer reactive. It is imposed. This is the moment the commander has been building toward. Back-channel messages intensify. Allies demand confirmation that a full commitment is underway. Political leadership wants reassurance that the gamble is not spiraling out of control. The answers, when given, are measured, calm, almost understated. There is no celebration, no declaration of success. Only the quiet confidence of a plan unfolding exactly as intended. For the soldiers executing it, the difference is immediate. There is no chaos, no last-minute confusion. Orders arrive on time and make sense. Resistance is met with overwhelming coordination rather than frantic adjustment. For the first time in months, the men feel that the battlefield is no longer deciding their fate. They are deciding it. The opposing forces begin to react more aggressively, but now they are reacting late. Each response arrives one step behind the reality on the ground. Intelligence summaries lag events by hours, sometimes longer. Assumptions made at dawn are invalid by mid-morning. The certainty that once fueled their advance starts to fracture. In London, the map finally begins to change. Lines that had been static for weeks start to bend, then break. The shift is not dramatic at first, but it is unmistakable. A senior official leans closer, tracing the movement with a finger, as if proximity might explain what he is seeing. This is not a lucky strike. It is not a sudden collapse. It is something far more unsettling. It is control. The decision to wait, to endure pressure, to resist the system's demand for immediate action is no longer theoretical. It is producing results. And with those results comes a realization that is both relieving and terrifying. The commander was right to ignore the clock, because now the clock belongs to him. By 11:20 a.m., the reports stop agreeing with each other. One message describes a controlled withdrawal, another insists the line is holding. A third claims contact has been lost entirely. Each arrives stamped with urgency, yet none explains the full picture. What they share is a single unsettling pattern. Every update is already outdated by the time it is read. This is how panic begins in modern war. Not with explosions, but with delay. Field commanders on the opposing side request clarification that never comes. Maps are revised, then revised again. Orders are issued based on assumptions that no longer exist. A unit moves to reinforce a position that has already been neutralized. Another waits for support that was redirected hours earlier. The system is still functioning, but it is no longer synchronized with reality. Intelligence struggles to keep pace. Reconnaissance identifies movement, but cannot determine intent. Signals are intercepted, but their meaning is unclear. Is this a feint, a limited push, or the beginning of something larger? The absence of obvious overextension suggests caution, not commitment. That assumption proves fatal, because the pressure being applied is not visible in isolation. It is cumulative. The commander understands this better than anyone watching from afar. He is not looking for dramatic breakthroughs. He is watching for fractures, moments when the enemy hesitates, when a decision is delayed just long enough to force another delay somewhere else. He has designed the operation to exploit human limits, not terrain alone. Confusion spreads faster than fear, and once it takes hold, recovery becomes nearly impossible. Within hours, the opposing command faces a dilemma with no clean solution. Commit reserves and risk exposing another sector, or hold them back and concede momentum. Either choice carries consequences that cascade outward. The initiative they once assumed was theirs has quietly slipped away. Not in a single blow, but through a sequence of enforced reactions. Back in London, the atmosphere shifts from anxiety to disbelief. The map shows progress, but it does not look like progress as they understand it. There is no single arrow thrusting forward, no obvious axis of advance. Instead, the entire front seems to sag as if gravity itself has changed direction. Advisors exchange glances. This was not how they imagined success would appear. Across the Atlantic, similar confusion emerges. Analysts struggle to categorize what they are seeing. The data does not match established patterns. The advance is methodical but not slow, aggressive but not reckless. It resists easy explanation, and that makes it difficult to counter. On the ground, the soldiers feel the difference most acutely. Resistance weakens not because it vanishes, but because it arrives fragmented. Counterattacks lack coordination. Firepower is misaligned. Each engagement ends with the same outcome. The enemy pulls back, then pulls back again, unsure where to stand. This is the moment the commander has been waiting for. Not collapse, but recognition. The instant when the opposing side realizes that every option available to them leads to a worse position than the one before. That realization does not announce itself loudly. It settles in slowly like exhaustion. Late in the afternoon, a senior officer on the opposing side studies a revised situation report. He pauses longer than usual, reads it again, then says nothing. The silence draws attention. Someone asks if there has been a mistake. He answers quietly, "No, this is worse." Because for the first time since the campaign began, the enemy is no longer reacting to what they see. They are reacting to what they fear is coming next. At 4:40 p.m., the confirmation finally arrives, and it does not come with drama. No alarms, no raised voices, just a revised operational summary placed on a table already crowded with maps. It is read once, then read again. The figures align, the movements match. The inconsistencies that plagued earlier reports are gone. What remains is a picture too clear to ignore. The front has not merely shifted, it has inverted. Positions believed to be secure are now exposed. Routes assumed open are under controlled fire. Units that were meant to anchor the line are disengaging not by plan, but by necessity. This is not a temporary setback. It is a structural failure unfolding in real time. The kind that cannot be fixed with orders alone. A senior officer studies the map and finally says the words no one has wanted to hear. This is not an enemy probing for advantage. This is an operation designed to decide the campaign. The realization spreads quickly, carried not by panic, but by clarity. The worst moment in war is not confusion. It is understanding. Across headquarters, the tone changes. Messages become shorter. Questions give way to instructions that grow increasingly defensive. Requests for reserves multiply. Timetables are adjusted, then abandoned. The system is no longer planning. It is coping. The commander on the opposing side now faces a narrowing set of choices, each worse than the last. Commit fully and risk encirclement. Withdraw and concede momentum permanently. Hold position and be dismantled piece by piece. None offer recovery. All offer loss. The initiative that once felt secure has evaporated without a single decisive engagement to mark its passing. Back in London, the reaction is immediate and restrained. There is relief, but it is tempered by disbelief. The scale of what is happening exceeds expectations. Advisors trace the lines again, comparing them to previous projections. The outcome is undeniable. The gamble has paid off, not through speed alone, but through control exercised at exactly the right moment. This is the good God realization, though few say it aloud. The kind that forces even seasoned planners to recalibrate their understanding of war. What seemed like hesitation was preparation. What looked like delay was compression. The waiting did not weaken the effort. It concentrated it. On the ground, the effect is unmistakable. Enemy resistance no longer feels purposeful. Countermeasures arrive late and in isolation. Communications break down under the weight of too many revisions. Officers begin making decisions without guidance, not out of initiative, but out of necessity. That is when cohesion truly fails. The commander observes all of this without celebration. There is no sense of triumph, only confirmation. The plan worked because it was allowed to finish forming, because pressure was absorbed rather than answered, because the moment of action was chosen, not forced. As evening settles over the desert, the shape of the campaign is already changing. What began as a desperate defense has become an irreversible advance. The enemy understands it now. Allies understand it now. And most importantly, the system that once doubted the decision has been confronted with its outcome. The war has not ended, but the argument has, and from this point forward, every move on the battlefield will be measured against a new reality. One where patience proved deadlier than haste, and a single decision made in isolation bent the course of an entire front in the span of a single day. By 7:30 p.m., the consequences begin to ripple outward far beyond the desert. What started as a battlefield adjustment is now forcing political and strategic recalculation across the alliance. Messages move between capitals with unusual urgency. The tone is careful, almost restrained, but beneath it lies a shared recognition. The balance has shifted, and with it expectations. For months, coordination among allies has relied on assumptions that no longer hold. Timelines were built around caution, plans were framed to compensate for uncertainty. Now those foundations are unstable. The success unfolding in North Africa accelerates everything. Schedules tighten, objectives are pulled forward. What was once a distant possibility becomes an immediate consideration. This acceleration creates friction. Across the Atlantic, planners begin asking difficult questions. If one commander can dictate tempo this decisively, how much independence should he be allowed? Control becomes a concern not because it was abused, but because it proved effective. Success, paradoxically, introduces new risks. Political leaders understand that momentum once unleashed does not confine itself neatly to agreed boundaries. Within the alliance, quiet disagreements surface. Some see the outcome as validation of decisive leadership. Others worry about precedent. The system prefers predictability, even in victory. What it has just witnessed is something else entirely. A single will bending a complex coalition toward an outcome it did not fully anticipate. On the battlefield, the soldiers sense this shift instinctively. Orders now carry a different weight. There is confidence, but also exhaustion. The pace has been relentless, not because of chaos, but because control demands constant attention. Supply lines stretch. Units push forward faster than infrastructure can comfortably support. Success creates its own form of pressure. The commander understands this cost intimately. He does not slow the advance out of caution, but out of calculation. Momentum must be preserved without outrunning certainty. This balance is delicate. Too much restraint risks allowing recovery. Too much speed risks fracture. The margin for error narrows with every mile gained. Meanwhile, the opposing forces regroup as best they can. Retreat becomes organized, then increasingly desperate. Commanders seek defensible positions, but none offer the security they once promised. The psychological impact of losing control lingers longer than any physical setback. Confidence does not return easily once broken. In London, the atmosphere is subdued. There are no public celebrations, no grand announcements. Privately, there is acknowledgement of what has been achieved. The gamble has succeeded, but it has also revealed the limits of centralized control in modern war. When outcomes hinge on individual judgment, authority must either adapt or fracture. This realization weighs heavily on those responsible for the decision. Empowering one man resolved a crisis, but it also created a new reality that cannot be undone. The alliance must now contend with a commander whose methods have been vindicated, whose confidence has been reinforced, and whose influence will extend into every future plan. As night falls, the desert quiets, but the strategic reverberations grow louder. The campaign is no longer about survival. It is about exploitation. How far this advantage can be pushed, how quickly it can be translated into lasting change. Because victories in war do not end arguments. They redefine them. By 9:40 p.m., the reports no longer argue with one another. They converge. Different channels, different commands, same conclusion. The front is stable in a way it has not been for months, not because fighting has stopped, but because direction has been imposed. The advance is no longer speculative. It is managed. This is when the cost begins to surface. Success tightens scrutiny. Every decision is re-examined not for failure, but for precedent. Political leaders study the operation not only to understand how it worked, but to determine how much autonomy they have just surrendered. In coalition warfare, victory achieved through unilateral judgment creates unease. It solves the immediate problem while exposing a structural one. Behind closed doors, questions are asked carefully. How much latitude should a field commander be allowed? Where does coordination end and independence begin? The answers are unclear because the outcome has already justified the method. To challenge it now would be to deny results that cannot be disputed. On the battlefield, the human cost becomes visible. Units rotate forward under constant pressure. Equipment wears faster than anticipated. Fatigue accumulates quietly without the drama of defeat, but with equal inevitability. The discipline that made the operation possible now demands maintenance. Control is not a state. It is an effort. The commander understands this perhaps better than anyone. He resists the temptation to press relentlessly, knowing that overextension can undo even the most carefully constructed advantage. Orders emphasize consolidation, not pause, but absorption. Gains must be turned into structure. Momentum must be translated into permanence. This restraint frustrates some observers. They see opportunity and want exploitation. The same voices that once demanded action now urge acceleration. War compresses memory. Yesterday's caution becomes today's hesitation. The cycle threatens to repeat itself, driven by success rather than fear. Within the alliance, personal dynamics shift. Respect grows, but so does distance. The commander's confidence, once criticized, now carries weight that unsettles peers. Cooperation becomes more formal, less intuitive. Admiration mixes with apprehension. The man who delivered victory has become a variable that must be managed. In London, the leadership reflects on the decision that set all of this in motion. The gamble worked, but it narrowed future choices. Authority granted in crisis is difficult to retract in stability. The balance between political oversight and military judgment has been altered perhaps permanently. This is the paradox of decisive leadership in war. It clarifies the battlefield while complicating the system behind it. It wins time while consuming trust. It delivers outcomes that demand acceptance, even as they provoke resistance. As the night deepens, the desert remains active, but quieter. The immediate danger has passed. What remains is a new phase defined not by survival, but by responsibility. The weight of what has been achieved presses forward, shaping every conversation, every plan, every expectation. The campaign will continue. Battles will still be fought. Losses will still occur. But something fundamental has changed. The argument over whether waiting was a mistake is over. The evidence lies in the ground already taken. What endures now is a harder question. How much of history can be bent by one decision before the system pushes back? Just after 11 p.m., the rooms that had been crowded all day begin to empty. Maps are rolled up, reports are filed. The immediate crisis has passed, but sleep does not come easily. For those responsible, the weight of the decision grows heavier now that its consequences are clear. Victory has arrived, but it has not simplified anything. It has exposed the truth beneath modern war. Speed did not win this campaign by itself, nor did numbers or technology or even firepower. What changed the course of events was timing, chosen by a human being under pressure, without consensus, and against the instincts of the system built to restrain him. The battlefield bent not because it was forced, but because it was understood. This is the uncomfortable lesson war keeps teaching, and institutions keep trying to forget. Systems exist to reduce risk. They smooth out extremes. They prevent catastrophe by slowing decisions until uncertainty feels manageable. In peace, this works. In crisis, it often fails. The moment danger compresses time, hesitation becomes its own form of violence. Choices delayed are still choices made just by circumstance instead of intention. The commander did not win because he was reckless. He won because he refused to let the moment decide for him. He absorbed pressure rather than reacting to it. He accepted being disliked, doubted, and challenged in exchange for control over one decisive instant. When he acted completely, leaving no space for reversal. That is why the result feels unsettling even in success, because it suggests that history is not shaped gradually but abruptly, that entire fronts can hinge on hours, not months, that the difference between collapse and dominance can rest on a single refusal to move too soon. War does not reward balance. It rewards commitment at the precise moment. Commitment becomes irreversible. Those who watch this from a distance often reduce it to personality, ego, temperament, style. But those are just surfaces. Beneath them lies something more dangerous and more rare. The willingness to carry responsibility without permission, to act without the comfort of agreement, to accept that if the outcome is disaster, there will be no one else to blame. That is what bends history. Not brilliance alone, but ownership. As the lights dim and the night deepens, the desert remains silent but altered. The campaign will continue shaped by this moment long after the dust settles. New battles will come. New arguments will rise. The system will reassert itself as it always does. But it will do so changed, aware now of its own limits. And somewhere in the space between caution and audacity, the question lingers. If another moment like this arrives, another hour where everything hangs in balance, will someone else dare to choose timing over safety? Or will the system decide for them?